I was 14 when my cousin Melissa died in a horseback riding accident. She was my age. We only met once, years ago, but I remember her being quiet, graceful in that way some kids are before life really gets to them. We didn't grow up together. Our families lived hundreds of miles apart, but I remember her smile. It was a strange thing, really. I never knew her well, and yet she stuck with me. It wasn't until 4 years later, when I was 18, that I saw her again. Well, not exactly. That summer, my parents planned a long overdue family vacation. We were going to stay with my aunt and uncle, Melissa's parents, in their house out in the countryside. A long 2-story farmhouse with wooden siding bleached pale from years under the sun. It sat at the edge of a narrow road, surrounded by fields and patches of dense trees. Quiet, peaceful, and just isolated enough to give you that feeling in your chest, like something was watching from the tree line. I hadn't seen that side of the family since Melissa's funeral, and even then, everything felt like a blur. So showing up now, older, more aware, and with memories that refused to settle properly, it felt surreal. We pulled into the driveway just as the sun dipped below the hills. The house looked almost exactly how I remembered it from when I was a child, except now there was something off about it. Not wrong, exactly, just older. Tired, as if the house had aged with grief too. Inside, the air was cool and heavy with the scent of wood polish and something older, more natural, like soil after rain. The walls were lined with old photos and paintings, and I could hear the creak of footsteps above us as my uncle moved around, getting our rooms ready. That's when my aunt looked at me. "You've grown up so much," she said softly. "You look just like her." She didn't need to say the name. We both knew who she meant. I gave her a small smile, unsure of how to respond. I didn't want to be rude, but it was a strange thing to hear, especially when her eyes stayed on me a little too long, like she was seeing something I couldn't. Later that evening, I was shown to the guest room. It was quiet, neat, and sparsely decorated. The kind of room made up for guests that don't come often. But as I sat on the bed, something tugged at my memory. The faint smell of lavender and the way the light spilled across the wooden floor. I'd been in this room before. That's when my mom told me. "This used to be Melissa's room," she said gently, placing my suitcase by the dresser. "But if you're uncomfortable..." I shook my head. "It's okay." But was it? I looked around again, slower this time. There was nothing obviously personal, no posters or trinkets. Just a bed, a wooden desk, and an old mirror above a small dresser. But the energy, it lingered, like a breath held in still air. That night, while brushing my teeth, my younger sister leaned in the bathroom doorway and said, "You know everyone keeps saying you look just like Melissa, right?" I rolled my eyes. "Yeah, I've noticed." "It's weird," she whispered. "Like she could have been your twin." I didn't know how to feel about that. We shared some features, sure, brown hair, dark eyes, thin frame. But to be compared to someone who was gone, someone whose life ended so suddenly, it was unsettling. I lay in bed later that night, staring at the ceiling, unable to shake the weight of that comparison. My mind wandered back to the funeral. I barely remembered what Melissa looked like in the casket, but I remembered the look on her mother's face. Hollow, like something vital had been carved out of her. And now, here I was, lying in her old bed, being told over and over how much I looked like her. As I turned off the bedside lamp, the darkness settled in like a blanket soaked in memory. I felt it seep into the room, quiet, cold, watchful. The kind of silence that wasn't just the absence of noise, but the presence of something else entirely. I pulled the sheets up to my chin and shut my eyes. Somewhere deep in the house, I heard the soft creak of floorboards. And for the first time since we arrived, I realized something I hadn't before. This house had never truly let her go. The next day passed uneventfully. We spent the morning lounging around the porch, sipping iced tea and catching up on distant family stories. My aunt seemed lighter somehow. Maybe just glad to have people in the house again. Or maybe it was something else. I couldn't be sure. At one point, I found myself standing in the hallway that connected the guest rooms, looking at the framed photographs that lined the walls. Most were old family portraits, sun-washed memories frozen in time. But one photo in particular caught my eye. It was of Melissa, taken just a few months before she died. She was smiling gently, seated on a brown horse in an open field. The wind had caught her hair, just enough to give the image movement. She looked peaceful, free, and as I stood there staring at her face, I realized again how similar we looked. It was more than a resemblance. It was almost as if I were looking at a reflection from another life. That afternoon, a summer storm rolled in from the west. The sky darkened, and rain began tapping softly against the windows. I went to the converted garage with my cousins and uncles. It had become a sort of makeshift game room, with old board games, a dartboard, and a creaky couch that probably predated all of us. We played cards, told stories, and laughed louder than the thunder outside. The lights occasionally flickered, but no one paid much attention. It was a cozy kind of evening. Safe, until I decided to go back into the house. It was just after midnight. My sister had already gone to bed, and I felt the pull of sleep too. So I told everyone good night and stepped back into the main house alone. The contrast hit me immediately. While the garage had been filled with warmth and noise, the house was still and silent, like stepping into a different world entirely. I moved through the kitchen and into the hallway. The only sound was the storm outside and my own breathing. The hallway stretched ahead of me, dimly lit by a small lamp at the far end. And that's when I saw her. There, just outside the laundry room door, stood a girl. She wasn't facing me. Her head was slightly down, long brown hair falling forward over her face. She wore a pale, cream-colored dress that hung just past her knees. She looked younger than me, smaller. She had one hand raised with a single finger pressed to her lips, and her gaze was locked on the floor like she was deep in thought. For a brief moment I froze. I assumed it was my sister. Maybe she had gotten up to look for something, or had heard the storm and couldn't sleep. I felt the tension leave my body as I took a step forward and spoke her name. No answer. I called her name again, a little louder this time. Still nothing. I stepped closer, heart beginning to beat just a little faster. My footsteps were slow, cautious. The soft creak of the floor beneath me echoed down the hall. I reached the entrance to the laundry room, and it was empty. There was no one there. I stopped dead in my tracks, my skin suddenly cold despite the warm summer air. I looked behind me. The hallway was still empty. The light flickered slightly overhead. I knew what I had seen. That wasn't imagination. That wasn't a shadow playing tricks on my mind. Someone, something, had been standing there. And in that moment, the realization hit me like a punch to the chest. She looked just like the photo in the hallway. I turned on every light I could find and stood there, trembling. My thoughts raced. I wasn't prone to seeing things. I wasn't sleep-deprived or imagining shadows. That had been real. I ran upstairs and found my sister already in bed, earbuds in, scrolling on her phone. She looked at me with wide eyes as soon as I opened the door. "You okay?" she asked, already sensing something was off. "Did you go into the laundry room just now?" I asked. She frowned, confused. "No, I've been up here the whole time." "Why?" I hesitated. Then I told her what I had seen. Every detail. She listened in silence, her face gradually shifting from skeptical to deeply uneasy. "I passed that hallway 5 minutes ago," she said. "The light was off then, completely dark. If someone had been in there." She trailed off, suddenly pale. We sat there in silence for a long time after that. Neither of us slept that night. I kept thinking about her. Melissa. The way she looked. The way she stood there as if waiting for someone to notice her. And the strangest part of all, she hadn't scared me. Not really. Not until I realized she wasn't supposed to be there. Not in that hallway. Not in this world anymore. The morning after that night was heavy. The sunlight didn't come through the windows the way it had the day before. It was filtered, pale, like the house itself was tired. I hadn't slept at all. My sister looked just as worn out. We stayed quiet at breakfast, the clinking of silverware louder than our conversations. Eventually, my mom noticed. "You two look like you saw a ghost," she said with a half-smile. But her face dropped when I didn't laugh. I looked at my aunt, who was sipping coffee and flipping through an old magazine. "I think I saw Melissa last night," I said. The words just came out. There was no build-up, no hesitation. My mom turned her head sharply, and my aunt froze, her hand still mid-motion as she lowered the cup to the table. There was a silence, a long one. Then my aunt put the cup down completely and looked at me. Her face didn't show fear or shock, just something else. Resignation, maybe. "Tell me exactly what happened," she said. I did. Every detail. The cream-colored dress, the long brown hair, the way she stood in the hallway just outside the laundry room with her finger pressed to her lips. I told her how I thought it was my sister, how I walked closer and found no one there, how I knew what I saw. She listened closely. No interruption, no skepticism. When I finished, she leaned back slightly in her chair and glanced at my mom. "Today is the day she died," she said quietly. I looked at her, stunned. "What?" "Today is the anniversary of the accident," she continued. "She would have been 18 today." I didn't know what to say. The air in the kitchen felt different now. Heavier, more still. My mom looked shocked too. She clearly hadn't remembered the date. But my aunt didn't seem surprised. "Strange things happen in this house on her birthday," she said. "They always have." She stood up and walked to a drawer by the fridge. She pulled out a small photo album, the old kind with plastic sleeves and handwritten labels. She flipped to the back and showed me a photo. Melissa, probably 11 or 12 years old, standing in front of the very laundry room where I had seen her. Same posture, same dress. She loved that dress, my aunt said. It was the one she wore the day before she died. Something about hearing that sent a chill down my spine. I studied the photo again and realized how easy it would be to mistake her for me. Or me for her. No wonder everyone kept saying we looked alike. We left the table in silence. No one really knew how to process what I had seen. My aunt tried to go about her day like usual, but I could tell she was rattled, and I started noticing small things. The air in the hallway colder than the rest of the house. The way the dog barked at the base of the stairs without any clear reason. How the clock in the living room had stopped at the exact time Melissa had passed years ago. My sister and I stayed close to each other for the rest of the day. We didn't talk about what happened. We didn't have to. There was a quiet understanding that something had shifted, something we couldn't explain, something that had always been there in this house, just waiting. That evening, I found myself alone in the room Melissa used to sleep in. It had been turned into a guest room since her passing, but some of her old things still lingered. A lamp shaped like a horse, a dusty bookshelf with her name carved on the side, an old sweater folded neatly in a drawer. I sat on the bed and let the quiet settle over me. The house creaked gently, the kind of old wood moans that never meant anything before, but now felt like whispers. I thought about how many birthdays had come and gone since Melissa died. How many times my aunt and uncle must have felt that same presence I had, and how they had learned to live with it. I wasn't scared anymore, not in the way I had been. It was more like a deep, unsettling curiosity, like I had been let in on a secret that had existed for years before I ever arrived. And now that I knew, I couldn't unknow it. That night, just before bed, I walked back to the hallway. I stood by the laundry room. The light was off, just like it had been, but nothing moved. No figures, no shadows, just the soft hum of the night. Still I spoke. "Melissa," I said quietly, "I saw you." And for a moment, the silence felt different. Not empty, not alone. The next few days passed slowly, like the house itself had fallen into a quiet slumber. Nothing strange happened, not directly, but there was still something lingering, an atmosphere, like the very walls remembered her. I spent more time alone in that guest room, Melissa's old room. I found myself drawn to it. There was an energy there, not threatening, but dense, like something trying to speak through silence. The air always felt a little colder in there, even when the sun was high outside. On the third morning, I sat on the bed again, flipping through the same photo album my aunt had shown me. Each picture was a small ghost, frozen in time. Melissa at the beach. Melissa riding a bike down a dirt road. Melissa standing next to a birthday cake, her face lit by candlelight. Her smile in every photo was soft, almost sad, as if she knew something none of us did. That's when I noticed the mirror. It was propped against the far corner of the room, nearly full length, the kind you'd find in an old dressing room. I hadn't paid much attention to it before. The frame was wooden, carved with little floral patterns, and the glass had a slight haze to it, like it had held too many reflections and forgotten how to be clear. I stood in front of it and looked at myself, but it wasn't just myself that I saw. There was something off, not dramatic, just subtle. The reflection didn't quite move in sync with me. My eyes looked the same, but there was a flicker of something behind them. A hesitation, maybe, or a memory that wasn't mine. I blinked and leaned closer. I could feel my breath bounce off the glass. Then, just as I turned to step away, something shifted. For a split second, I saw her. Not in full, not a face, just the faint outline of a figure standing behind me in the mirror. A blur, cream-colored, the same tone as that dress, and it was gone before my brain could fully register it. My heart slammed in my chest, and I spun around, expecting someone, something, but the room was empty, completely still. Even the dust in the air seemed frozen. I stepped back and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the mirror. I didn't know what was happening. I couldn't tell if my mind was playing tricks on me or if I was actually experiencing something beyond explanation. But one thing was certain. That room was not empty. Not entirely. Later that evening, I went downstairs to find my aunt in the kitchen. She was alone, cleaning dishes and humming softly to herself. I asked her about the mirror. She paused, turned off the faucet, and looked at me. We brought that mirror back from the farm after she passed. She said, it used to be in her room up there. She used to stare into it for hours. Why? I asked. She never said, my aunt replied. Just that she liked how it felt, like it showed her things. I felt a chill spread through me, like it showed her things. That night, I couldn't sleep. The mirror was still in the corner, and I had this growing sense that I shouldn't cover it, like that would only provoke whatever was watching. I turned on the bedside lamp and tried to distract myself with an old paperback I'd brought, but my mind kept drifting. I don't remember falling asleep, but I remember waking up. It was pitch black. The lamp had been turned off. The door was shut, and the mirror was glowing. Not like a lamp. It wasn't emitting light, but it looked alive. The glass shimmered faintly, like it was made of water, not silver and glass. And in that ripple, I saw letters form. Melissa, written softly, slowly, as if a fingertip were gliding just beneath the surface. I sat up, breath caught in my throat. I didn't move. I didn't blink. And the moment I did, it was gone. The mirror was just a mirror again. I slept with the light on the rest of the night. The next morning, I told my mom I wanted to sleep on the couch downstairs for a few nights. I could tell she was worried, but she didn't press. I think she had seen enough of my face to know something was wrong. And maybe, deep down, she believed me too. Melissa's name stayed with me the rest of the day. I felt like I was being drawn deeper into something. Not just a haunting, something more personal. Like she was trying to reach out to me, specifically, and I didn't know why. But I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. I didn't return to Melissa's room for the rest of the week. Even walking past it made my stomach turn. But something had shifted. Whatever was happening wasn't confined to that one space anymore. It followed me now. Not with footsteps or creaking doors, but with presence. Subtle changes in air pressure. The sensation of being watched. Flickers in my peripheral vision that disappeared the second I turned to look. The worst part was how familiar it all was becoming. Like I was adapting to it. On the final night of our trip, my aunt and uncle went out to visit some old friends, and my mom and sister were watching a movie in the living room. I told them I was going to bed early, but that was a lie. I wasn't tired. I wasn't anything really. Just restless, hollow, and I felt called. I found myself standing in front of Melissa's room again. I stared at the door for a long time before slowly turning the knob and stepping inside. The air was cold, heavier than before. The mirror was still in the corner, but now it felt like the centerpiece of the room. Like everything else was just furniture orbiting it. I sat on the bed and looked at it from across the room. I expected something to happen. The name, the glow, the figure, but there was nothing, just silence, until I stood up and walked toward it. The closer I got, the more the glass seemed to shimmer, not visibly, but in sensation. I could almost feel it hum beneath my skin. I stopped in front of it and looked into my reflection. And then, suddenly, it wasn't my reflection anymore. The face looking back was mine, but younger. 14, maybe 15. But it wasn't me. It was her. Melissa. Same eyes. Same mouth. But different. She was dressed in that cream-colored dress again. Her long brown hair perfectly brushed. Her hands at her sides, trembling slightly. Her eyes were filled with something that almost looked like sorrow, or maybe longing. And she moved. Her lips parted slowly. I leaned in closer, afraid to breathe. She whispered something. No sound came through the glass, but I could read her lips. Remember me. The room around me began to tremble, or at least it felt like it. My ears rang with pressure. The air thickened. I tried to pull away, but my body wouldn't respond. I felt locked into place, held by her gaze. Then the images began. Flashes, blinding and fast. A horse rearing up, screaming. A forest. Hooves pounding against wet earth. A fall. Silence. Then a funeral. Closed casket. My aunt weeping uncontrollably. My mom with her arm around her. A photo of Melissa by the altar. Then I saw myself. Not in a memory. In the mirror. Older. Pale. Crying. Melissa stood behind me. Her hand reaching toward my shoulder. Her expression twisted not in anger, but in desperation, like she was begging for something I couldn't give. And then everything went black. When I woke up, I was on the floor, sprawled beneath the mirror. The house was quiet. I stumbled to my feet, heart racing, vision spinning. I looked back into the mirror and saw only myself. Normal, but different. Something inside me had shifted. I could feel it. I left the room without looking back. The next morning, we packed up and said our goodbyes. My aunt hugged me tightly and whispered in my ear that Melissa would have loved me. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. On the drive home, I stared out the window, watching the countryside blur past. Every once in a while, I thought I saw her reflection in the glass. Just for a second. At night, I still dream of her. Sometimes I hear footsteps outside my bedroom door. Sometimes I wake up and the mirror in my room is fogged, like someone stood too close to it. Sometimes I feel her sadness, like it's stitched into my own. And sometimes I think, she never left. If you enjoyed this chilling story, don't forget to subscribe to Beyond Fear and hit the bell icon so you won't miss any of our upcoming videos. Here, you'll find more real stories filled with mystery, psychological horror, and the supernatural every week. Before you go, make sure to check out the 2 videos that just popped up in the end screen. I promise, they'll leave you with goosebumps. See you next time, if you dare.